yourself, right?
Right, exactly. It was what was happening. All right, I'm
Yeah.
going to switch a couple things over here on the other computer
Okay.
so that we can come on live through. There we go.
Is now streaming live on YouTube.
Live streaming.
So
Yeah,
in
there
that
we go.
case, maybe we should just make the usual opening remarks that we're reading from Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And this is Bruce Rawls with Lynn Johnson and on ACIM Gather. And been having fun doing these kind of readings for years, huh?
Oh man, no kidding. We have just been reading away and reading more and more. I mean, it's, every time it's something more interesting. Let's see, I'm having a little moment of what the heck am I doing here? And
Is everything recording? Should I just go ahead and start reading
everything is recording and you
Oh,
can
okay.
start reading, but I'll get us live with the
Pal Talk?
book in the
Oh,
because I
right.
don't
Yes.
have
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Great. Okay. Well, I have us on page 133 at the beginning of chapter 6. As you mentioned, we read a little bit of this last week, but just kind of like just sort of a running start, but we didn't really get very far. So I'll just start this chapter again. This is Helen's letters to Bill of summer 1965.
Let's see what happened to I was on the right page. Oh, there we go.
There you go. You're on it. And it begins during the 7.5 years that date from Bill's, quote, "there must be another way," quote, speech to the end of the course of scribing. There was a period when Helen and Bill's relationship seemed to change for the better. There survive a series of letters Helen wrote to Bill in the summer of 1965, and some journal notes that Bill kept in the late summer and early fall of 1966. From these letters and journal entries, it is clear how hard Helen and Bill worked in applying the principles they were learning from Jesus. This learning included not only the lessons from A Course in Miracles itself, but from the more personal teachings that they were receiving from Jesus, which began prior to the start of the course, that encompassed their individual lives as well as their relationship with each other. There was a sense of hope that did not exist before or after, not to mention an openness to examine truthfully their own perceptions of themselves and each other. In this chapter, we examine Helen's letters and leave Bill's journal for chapter 10. So there we have it, a preface for this chapter.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. This was a time when people actually wrote letters to each other.
That still occasionally happens. I occasionally get letters from, well, I have an aunt in particular who likes to write me, and I try to write back, when I can, and things like that. But yeah, it's kind of rare nowadays, and postal letters are something like little treasured gems out of nowhere that when you get those sometimes, huh?
Yeah, and what's interesting, I know people who wrote letters to Ken Wapnick. He wrote them back all the time. He must have, how did he do it? I don't know. But everybody I know who's ever said, I wrote a letter to Ken and he wrote a letter back. And I know one person who has a whole book that they made of the letters back and forth between them and Ken Wapnick. And I'm like, what? When did he have time for all of this? Writing all these books, giving all these talks. I mean, he must have been like in the multiverse doing all sorts of different things because he was a prolific. I mean, the Holy Spirit just worked through him and the energy that I'm amazed at. But anyway, that was a sidebar and a side note, and also maybe kind of a thing that maybe if we were in that state of mind, we could be a lot more productive too. If you know what I mean. I don't know if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, I know what you mean. And I find that when I'm trusting that inner kindness teacher, aka Holy Spirit, I tend to be more productive. I tend to get up earlier, stay up later, not in any kind of abusive way, but just like, when you're having fun, it seems like you have more energy. And when we're basically, when we're following the course's curriculum and forgiving, and which is really just letting go of our judgments about our own projections, um, it's there's a greater sense of grace and ease and well-being that I think just is sort of an automatic thing. It doesn't mean that we're making the world better. It just means that we're no longer allowing our own miscreations to bring us down, because we realize they're just dreams that are still persistent for a while, and but they have had no effect on our real nature, our real
Yeah.
eternally shared nature.
Yeah. And I mean, that's really an amazing thing when you think about how everything, I mean, this is like big revelation, Lynn here. We have made up everything that we see.
Mhm.
And, I used to think, oh, I made, how did I do that? I did it because it's in my mind. And so everything that appears to be, I'm only experiencing because it's in my mind. That's the only place that I can experience anything. My body can't experience anything on its own. You take me out of it and it's like not sentient anymore. What I am is the consciousness that is perceiving everything, but I'm not perceiving anything that's out there.
Yep.
It's something that's in my own mind. And so, when you begin to understand that, or when you begin, I don't, I'm talking for somebody else. When I begin to understand that, when I begin to understand that, I begin to see how then I can change whatever it is that I see by giving up. What does Jesus say in A Course in Miracles? Giving up attack thoughts.
Hmm. Hmm.
And attack thoughts are the ego's definition of what it is that I see. Everything I see actually is an attack thought, because it's a thought that there's something outside of God and outside of me. When I recognize that there really is nothing out there, then there's no the attack disappears.
Hmm. It's,
Because there's yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's the neutral pixel metaphor, I think, really is helpful for me. If I can just, glance around like those early workbook lessons suggest, look at the stuff on your desk and in the room that you're in, and or wherever you happen to be, and just just have a leisurely, almost like automatic pan mode, where you're just scrolling across and seeing everything as neutral objects, because that's really what they are. I mean, everything that we've given a name and a label and then we start assigning adjectives, and then we start making meaning out of those adjectives, and we say, oh, this is a good phone, or this is a bad computer, or this is a helpful book, or this is a malfunctioning lamp, or this is a whatever we happen to glance at. We have interpretations, and it's those interpretations that really drain us of our peace of mind, because we basically, as you were saying, as a default mode, we made up everything to be an attack on perfect oneness. And the attack, well, while that seems like a strong word, it's really the idea of blowing things apart. The Big Bang, the tiny mad idea of the Course is really that if everything is really one, then anything that seems to be separate is really just a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of an intrinsic oneness that we've trained our minds to not see. And so the Course's whole premise is we have to untrain our minds, and we can't do that on our own. We need the help of the thought system that was made as a response to the tiny mad idea, which the Course calls the Holy Spirit or Jesus. And that thought system is the undue remedy or the correction for every attack thought, every separating thought, every discriminating, distinguishing, differentiating thought that attempts to make what's pure undifferentiated mind, oneness, innocence, peace into separate parts that inevitably war with each other just by the very virtue of their presumed separation.
Exactly, exactly. And it's the attack is the same kind of attack that light has on darkness.
Mm-hmm.
When the room is dark and you turn on the light, the darkness disappears. That is, you know, that is it just no longer exists. And
Yeah.
so, we're not talking about attack in the way of a violent thing or even a thing that has an opinion. It really is just um it- we've given it a meaning,
Mm-hmm.
and that meaning is anything but love. And that's, someone asked in the room, Lynn, how do I wake up? And I answered back, see that everything is love, because it is either love or a call for love, which is love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the Holy Spirit's call for love. So, that's how we change everything. Instead of saying, this crappy computer, say, this love that's here. I mean, well, my opinion about the computer has no meaning, but the thing that it represents, the thing that is the essence of what it is love. And you could look at it logically and say, well, yeah, it's our decision to join, that we want to connect, that we want a purpose and a way to do that. And we thought we think we've lost our connection. So here, computer, wow, look at this, look at people in this time, how we are learning to connect. Look at, the future of how we're going to be able to connect. All of these things are not so that we can cause harm to each other or separate from each other. They really are so that we connect more and more and more. And you look at every, throughout the ages, every innovation, anything that has happened, that has shifted or changed things, even things that we think are made for war or for destruction, every single one of them has resulted in more and more connection, in more and more directions. I mean, right now, I in this country, 200 years ago, if there was a war going on in Israel or going on in Kenya or wherever, and I would not know anything about it unless somebody went there and came over, months later and said, "Gee, I was over there and this happened." I would be oblivious to it because the technology was not there. Now, within an instant, I know, whoa, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And people look and say the world is getting worse and worse. But I'm looking and saying, here is a connection. Now I know these people are in my mind. I can bless these people. I can send money to help these people, or I can, go myself. And, I mean, the connection is just so much more, even from Helen and Bill's time, the shift in the connection in this world, and I believe the reassembly of the sonship is happening exponentially. Anyway, enough of my big rant.
Yeah. And the reassembly is really just a reflection of our right-minded thinking that would be, what would be akin to the Holy Spirit's forgiveness classroom that says the separation never happened. And we're really just seeing that our attempts to dismantle perfect oneness were not successful and never could be. And in fact, it's an impossible crime. And therefore, the whole thought system of sin, guilt, and fear of retribution for that impossible crime, and the whole premise of the separation, the sin of separation, and the guilt over thinking that wow, we actually pulled this off, they're all unfounded. They're all fraudulent, bogus lies that we tell ourselves so many times per second that it's like the flickering of a movie at 30 or a TV screen at 30 or 60 or whatever times frames per second. The brain just blends it all into one movie, and we don't recognize that it's a holographic projection of just incredible sophistication that is completely fabricated, and it's the sensory data that's reaching our biological sensory organs is completely neutral, but we keep interpreting it as meaning something significant. And the course just says, well, what if that's not true? What if those interpretations are completely arbitrary and irrelevant to what's eternal? And of course, we trained our minds to ignore the eternal. So we need to untrain them or train them to undo those crazy interpretations with the help of what the Course calls the Holy Spirit, so that we can have the peace that is the price of admission to a state of mind of pure non-duality that we can't even fathom at this point. But that's
Yeah,
pretty cool, actually, that we at least we have a glimmer of an inkling of an idea that, well, maybe this is possible now.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, yeah, not just for people who study A Course in Miracles. I mean, it's happening for everybody all over. And I think when what you were just saying, I thought of, Byron Katie, and who would you be without that story?
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that is the question of everything. Who would you be without the story of Bruce? Who would I be without the story of Lynn? Who would I be without the story of the world and its history? And who would I be without, if none of those ever were? Who am I here?
Mhm.
And I mean, that's it's obviously the question that great sages ask. Uh,
And the ego's propaganda is always along the lines of, you would be nothing because the self, the little less self, or the silly, seemingly separate self, I like to say, call it, that we individually made up is nothing. I mean, if you fragment perfect oneness into countless, innumerable atoms and molecules of separate things that really can't function on their own, there is no self-sufficiency to any part of the sonship, as much as we try to do that. The well, I'm trying to think of oh, there's a project here not far from here in Arizona where they the biosphere too. They basically created an environment that was supposed to be completely self-contained, and several people went to go live in this large installation that had its own, forests and ocean, mini ocean, and just to try to make a little micro biome of the bigger thing, and it just didn't work because it needed what was going on outside to interact with what was going on inside. And when you cut that off, just like a tourniquet on, if you put a tourniquet on any one of your limbs, tighten it enough that that limb's going to atrophy and die and need to be, sawed off, kind of thing. But that's kind of how the thought system of the ego is really all about, this tourniquet to the mind that we keep applying, and we wonder why, we feel constricted, and the whole notion of fear is really, well, what if I've cut myself off? Well, no, we couldn't possibly cut ourselves off in perfect oneness, but we can believe that we can. Our minds are so powerful that we can believe that we could do that.
Right. And that is what is, I think, obviously plaguing and has been plaguing the world since the beginning of our uh uh manifestation as bodies, or thoughts of a world and bodies, is this idea that I can be separate and that I can be autonomous. But as you said, you can't cut off any part of me from the rest of what is, because no part of me can survive alone. Um, and I mean, and we can go into all kinds of scientific crap about how and why that works, but I mean, just to know that that is the truth, that is the case. And uh, just try to think of yourself, I mean, even if I was just out floating in space, without anything from here to, I would disintegrate. I would die. I couldn't survive. And, if you try to isolate yourself from the rest of the world, you will, it's impossible. The body can't exist. It doesn't in any way at all anyway.
It's a flawed spacesuit model, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And
The whole premise is unsustainable.
it is unsustainable. And, the Buddha talked about that. That's, something that has been, long, discussed and taught. And yet, there we come up thinking, nope, I can do it on my own. And, the only way I could do it on my own if I was incredibly supported, which I wouldn't be on my own. That, and I think that's it. I think that's the point I was trying to get to a little bit ago, is when you start to recognize how incredibly supported we are by God, by the universe, by what is, and that we couldn't be separated or apart from it, then we can begin to look at all these things, even things that we think are bad or not right or not perfect or not good enough. If you could just look at them and see, God is in that. God is in this thing. God is in everywhere, because where God is in my mind, and that's where all this is. So, back to the original point that, that's how you wake up, is by seeing God everywhere you look, because that's heaven. When God's everywhere you look, the world may still appear the same way, but you can't see it the same way. You can only see it as being perfect in all aspects.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I was flashing on something that was brought to mind from the conversation I had yesterday. It was in one of Gary Renard's audio programs called Fearless Love. He has an exercise where he suggests that when we look at someone or think about someone, we try to remind ourselves as often as we can that they are not expressions of part of spirit or part of something, but each one of us, seemingly different selves, is really all of spirit, all of oneness, all of completion, all of innocence. And that's the only way it can really work, because if any of us were really incomplete in any way, it would basically be saying, just in a roundabout way, the separation really did happen, and the foundation for war and polarization and conflict, and therefore, this unimaginable fear of annihilation would still be alive and well. But it's all made up.
It's all made up.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy. When you think about it, I mean, first you think about it as a concept, then you think of possibility, and then you grow in your understanding of it, and then it's like, oh, it's so clear. And but until you get to somewhere around there, it still seems like a pipe dream. So our book. uh,
Meanwhile, back at the story of our own resistance to the truth, reflected in Helen's biography, right?
right, exactly. So do you want me to read, or you want to?
Sure. You want to read?
All right, so we're
Left off?
we're reading about uh the letters between Helen and Bill. Um and so let's see, let me go back here just a minute. Yeah, Helen's letters to Bill. So that's what we're talking about. And did I go? I went too far. Okay, here we get there. All right. All right. So almost all of the letters were written to Bill while Helen and Louis were vacationing in southern New Jersey, or when Bill was on vacationing out of town. None of them was dated. Only a couple of the letters even noted the days of the week. Thus, it is impossible to place them exactly or to be sure of their proper sequence. However, from other evidence, it seems all but certain that they date from the summer of 1965. Wow. And what was I, 12 then? Wow, wow, wow. Oh my goodness, I'm excited. Okay. I cannot therefore vouch for their correct order, but I have placed them as best I could based on the content of the letters themselves. The reader will also find in much of these letters an authoritative, though gentle and defenseless tone. It obviously came from, quote, a wisdom that is not, in brackets, Helen's own. And that's from workbook lesson 135. And so, yeah, and I noticed that too. I was thinking that too, that Helen had an authority that was not, uh, was not typical for a person like her. I I heard it when I heard her speaking. I know that in a recording anyway. All right, so in her analysis of her own and Bill's situations, not to mention the advice she gives, Helen sounds overall more like the Jesus of the dictation, whose words were to be so gently incisive and helpful. Similar to my practice in presenting material from the original dictation of the course, as will be explained in Chapter 8, I have deleted overly personal material as well as extraneous comments by Helen on her writing style, typing mistakes, etc., for ease of reading and reference. I have omitted ellipses to denote such omissions, and I have numbered the 9 letters. So again, in his beautiful way of putting things together in a way that is easily communicated to us. So, so there we go. So one final note, Ken continues. These letters come within the context of the intense period compressed into a few short weeks that immediately preceded the course's scribing. Helen's occasional quick shifts from one subject to another is better understood when seen within the context of this intense self-examination. Since we do not have access to the daily inner and outer events of this period, some of the material found in the letters can be difficult to understand. I have added commentary when needed in an attempt to explain the workings of Helen's mind. Wow, this is great. And I just have to say, when I first read this, this went over my head. You know, I had no idea how meaningful this actually was. I thought it was curious and interesting, but had no idea how it was like, you know, what he's saying here is that Helen's mind, it seemed like, was being kind of shifted to a point of view that could actually connect with Jesus. And you know, I noticed that when we were reading those stories of her visions, there were some things in there that like are actually said in the course, words that are actually said in the course that you know, I was thinking, wow, that's so coincidental that she would write that way back then, and then here it, I see it in the course in the same basic words. Her mind was she was being prepared during this time, and even starting from, you know, going to school to get her doctorate in psychology, that it was like she was being prepped for this role as the scribe. And we're going to see that in these letters. So would you like to read the letter 1 here?
Sure, sure. Just to add to what you're just saying, Lynn, I was thinking about how, you know, I think, and this is one of Ken Wapnick's humorous comments. He says that in reference to channeling, he says, you know, people tend to make a big deal about channeling, and, and you know, most people would say in the context of, you know, how A Course in Miracles came about, that Helen channeled the material from Jesus, which probably, you know, a pretty good definition. But there tends to be a stigma or a like, woohoo, wow, you know, what a big deal about someone that channels. And Ken's comment was, we're all channeling all the time, and you know, we're either channeling the ego or channeling the Holy Spirit. And that's how simple it really is. I mean, we think it's a big deal, but when you say pass the salt with a scowl on your face, and you're upset because someone seems to be, you know, taking too long to pass it to you, you know, you're channeling the ego. But But if you say it, pass the salt with a smile on your, it doesn't, you may not even be physically smiling, but with a kind of inner smile, and without any kind of attack or grievance involved or irritation whatsoever, then you're probably channeling Holy Spirit. So, and I think if we all look back at our lives, we can notice those moments when we're at peace, we're channeling Holy Spirit. And so when Helen came through with tremendous clarity, I mean, she was just channeling Holy Spirit consistently to the point where when the course came through, it was just a phenomenally clear expression of her right mind. But it's really congruent with what is truly in everyone's right mind. And it's not like I think that's why we're all drawn to it, because we know that the truth is the same for everyone. That's the undoing of the first law of chaos, that says that the truth is different for everyone. Well, no, that our real identity is always going to be the same for everyone, right? So I think that's helpful to remember. Is like, I mean, because I can remember back when I was teaching adult ed classes back in the late 70s. I got a special designated credential to teach leadership in human relations, and working through real early new agey metaphysical stuff, and my ex-wife and I were doing this through adult schools in Northern California. And I remember there were times when I would find myself saying things that I had no idea where they came from. And, after they came out of my mouth, it's like, gee, not only where did that come from, but gee, that's pretty good. I might have to try that myself. Kind of thing. And I think that's kind of the way it is, when we're inspired, when we really let ourselves get out of the way, what comes through, whether it's words or behavior or just a peace of mind or ease of understanding, that's when there's no battle going on. That's probably Holy Spirit. When there's no annoyance, irritation, polarization, or anything out of the sin, guilt, fear grab bag, as Ken Wapnick calls it, like that. That's what's left over, and that's the goal, of course, is to make that our consistent 24/7 practice. But and Helen was very consistent when she was scribing the course in terms of bringing that through with incredible clarity. The only difference is that we're kind of sporadic hobbyists, and at least when she was scribing the course, she was doing it at an Olympic level performance. It would seem, and which is what Judy Sketch-Whitson said, that the goal of the course is to provide us with Olympic level mind training, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Anyway,
Absolutely. So
so
I'm
with
gonna,
that preface, I thought I'd give you a chance to respond to that before I read letter one.
yeah, no, I absolutely, I'm seeing that as you're saying it, I'm seeing how that's happening, and I see it happening to other folks that we're working with on a regular basis. That we're talking with people, like, I mean, there's people right here in this Zoom and people in this room that are like coming to that same awakening moment of just, I mean, it's like we're all together in this place
Yep.
where we're seeing the value of this and opening up to it. And it is wow. It started with a spark, and started with someone named Helen Schuckman saying, yeah, I'll do this.
Mm-hmm.
And and here we are. So and we're all being prepared, and
Yeah.
we're all being prepared. So
Yeah.
so I'm going to mute my mic. I need to take a really quick break,
Sure,
but
sure. And I'll add one more comment and then start reading letter one. And that is I want to give a tip of the hat to Dove Fishman for suggesting, when I went to the first San Francisco conference that I attended. I think there've been several before that, Rev Tony and the other fellow whose name escapes me, who's has since passed on. We're putting these conferences together, and that's when I first met Dove, and he was telling me about ACIM Gather, and he said, hey, you might want to, take a stint at that, and that's when I was thought, oh, sure, I'll give that a try, and I was doing a monologue for, I don't know, a year or so, and then you and I got together and started doing our dialogues, but I realized, it's that awkwardness, I think, that the self-consciousness that comes from trying to do it on your own, I think that gradually fades away when we realize what we're really here for is to be, a clear channel, if you will, or to really just get the heck out of the way and let what is our real nature has in store for us to, first heal or correct our misunderstandings and our misinterpretations. And then, wherever it spreads because minds are joined, we have no idea. That's so much the better. It's like, yeah, what a great, dessert or fringe benefit. But the secret of salvation is we're doing it to ourselves, but we're also advised that the the sole responsibility as students of a course is to accept the atonement for ourselves, and when we do that, it really automatically flows through to whoever our mind touches, and of course our mind touches everyone's mind because we're all interconnected on levels we can't even comprehend. So anyway, yeah, fun stuff, huh? And that's as it should be. So here's letter one, and then Ken begins. We begin with a document that is not really a letter to Bill, but Helen's reflections to herself about the material she had not discussed with Bill in an earlier phone conversation. The quote letter unquote is quite long and at times borders on a stream of consciousness. After a while, the reflections shift to a direct communication with Bill. I include most of it here as it provides some wonderful examples of Helen's openness regarding her relationship with Bill, Louis, and others. It is clear that during this period, Helen was paying careful attention to almost every thought in her mind, faithful to Jesus's I can't say that, request to her and Bill, later stated this way in the course. This is from chapter 4, section 3. And I've got the print version, so it just says text page 56 because it's an older version than the digital version that you've got on the screen there. But anyway, here's the quote from the course. Watch carefully and see what it is you're really asking for. Be very honest with yourself in this, for we must hide nothing from each other. And as Ken may be about to point this out in the writing, but I know elsewhere in reference to that quote, he says, yeah, and it's probably not too likely that Jesus is hiding anything from us. So guess what? The onus is all on us to bring our skeletons out of the closet, our secret sins and hidden hates out onto the examination table for review and dismantling and vaporization, basically, because when we bring out of the darkness into the light, out of the Plato's cave into the blazing light of true forgiveness, it's like there's nothing left. There's no problem that can't dissolve or resolve.
Yeah.
So
And
Ken continues.
I just
Go ahead.
here,
Sure.
that this is one of those places in the course where, if you really look at the course, he is asking us, look at your thinking and be very honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
He's not saying thinking to be honest with me. He's
Right.
be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And honesty with ourselves is that's the problem here. So I love that. Anyway, go on ahead.
And then of course it depends on which self, the lower case self or the uppercase self, because our lower case little s self, it doesn't understand anything having to do with honesty. It's made from deception. So even if you were to speak truth to that, it wouldn't have any ears or eyes to register anything that was said. But our decision-making mind can see that, and we can see, oh yeah, that's just been a needless suffering, squandered squandered peace opportunities that I have let go by only because I was too afraid to look at the craziness that I, inflicted on myself and seemingly on others. But no harm was done. No real identities were harmed in the making of this movie. Right? Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Ken continues. By the reference in the letter to Helen's birthday, July 14, we know that this was written in July. We can also date the year for certain as 1965, as that when the pictures of Mars Helen refers to were sent back to Earth. Helen began by reference referring to a conversation she had with Bill where she had changed a word related to Joan of Arc. And the quote is, "I thought it was better to change the word before I said it. I was tempted to correct this several times, but dismissed it as unimportant." Okay, now Ken's commentary continues. "This trait of altering some aspect of truth, however small, was an integral part of Helen's magical attempts to control her world and keep God out. The defense worked like this in Helen's system. If the truth is changed and discarded, it thus becomes false and non-existent. Helen's replacement for it is then made into truth by virtue of its acceptance as her reality." Doesn't that sound like what we all do? Once again, this isn't just about Helen, everyone. Okay. The new, quote, truth, unquote, is now under her control, while God's truth has been replaced. We shall see other examples of this trait later on, particularly when we consider the editing of the course, where it reduced Helen's anxiety to be able to make very minor changes, such as substituting, quote, that, unquote, for, quote, which, unquote, and vice versa, or to be in, quote, charge, unquote, of punctuation in some capitalizations. Helen then shifted to a discussion of a close friend of Bill, whom I identify here simply as S. As will be clear from Helen's statements, she did not like him at all and believed that he exercised a negative influence on Bill. Helen also felt that Bill often used S as an indirect means of expressing hostility towards her. Bill's friend assumes an important role not only in this communication, but in other letters as well. A painful symbol of the issues raised for Helen by S and his friendship with Bill was a house in Watermill, a beach suburb of New York City located on Long Island. It was a place to which Bill often went during summer weekends. He was half owner of the house, the other half owned by some other friends of Bill, a married couple. Helen felt that Bill used the house in part as a way of avoiding her, and she resented it very much. She was able to persuade Bill and his friends to allow Louis and her to come out, which they did fairly often. But as will be seen, this arrangement never really worked out and seemed to be yet another wedge of guilt and attack in her and Bill's stormy relationship. Helen's comments on her relationship with S, which I have excerpted, pointed up both the extent of her ego's hostility as well as her sincere attempts to be honest with herself and Bill, not to mention her efforts to undo such ego projections. So that takes us to the top of page 136. Do you have any comments on that so far, Lynn?
Yeah, wow. I'm just thinking about Bill with that house, and I mean, this probably she's probably right. I mean, he probably did use it to get away from her and probably a lot of other things, and to have his own private life, which um, you know, especially in that time as a closeted gay man, that where you could even meet to hook up. I mean, I'm thinking that maybe this S was maybe more than just a friend. And of course, Ken's too polite to say anything like that. And but now we're a lot more open and honest about these things than we were back then. And so I'm sure, yeah, she saw that as, yeah, if she was had a conflicted emotional claim on Bill, which obviously she did, um then the thought of someone else having that relationship probably really upset her. And so yeah, she wanted to go and hang out, she wanted to be there, to try to kind of control the situation. But it also shows that even though people may have had much more elevated minds or thinking, still the things that upset the ego are still the same things. It's the same thing. So,
Nothing new under the sun, huh?
absolutely. Anyway, that was just some thoughts I was having as you were reading that. So do you want me to continue reading?
Sure, but I just wanted to comment on your comments. I was thinking, and you shared something that could very well have been true of, that might have been, something going on with Bill and the people in that household, of a romantic or sexual nature or whatever. And yet, we don't know. I mean, the reason I bring that up is sometimes, in the relationship I have with my wife, sometimes she'll think, oh, well, Bruce is doing this because he wants to avoid me or he wants to avoid hearing what I'm saying or whatever. And on some occasions, that's true. Full disclosure. But a lot of times it's just I either haven't heard or a text that she thought I read didn't go through. It's just kind of normal human relation stuff, right? We assume so much, and we read into things so much that I think I try to remember to always, you know, make sure communications are clear, with or without Mercury retrogrades and all that kind of stuff. But just to notice how often I want to, make something out of something that may or may not have that implication or that intention to it, ascribe to it at all, and but
Yes.
I think that's our egos love to do that. And I do that all the time. I think everyone does that to an enormous extent. And not that that's bad or evil or anything. It's just to watch how often we do that.
Well, yeah. And the reason because if I really don't know, which I really don't, I don't know what anything is for. No, I mean,
Exactly.
I've been told that. I believe it. But
We're
but
we're all in that boat, huh?
but we fill in the story in a way that either makes us feel more safe or comfortable, or a confirmation bias of our original opinion. Like, I
Hmm.
know he must have done that because of this, because I knew he was this kind of person. You know,
Right.
the
Right.
ego is that's the ego's entire talent, is making these stories and making them seem cohesive. And it will not let you rest if there's a question in your mind about something. So, yes, I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, she's interpreting Bill. This is why he's doing this. And my natural, the way that the person of Lynn is Lynn always looks for the rational solution or the rational answer that would make, and this is crazy, what it would make either the people in the story innocent or guilty. That either I mean, seriously, that's what I do. And I noticed that the main thing that I try to do is make people innocent. That's not how the ego generally works, but I want to see that there's a good reason why they're doing what they're doing, and that they are trying to be as good as they can be. And I'm telling you what, that drives other people insane, because when they want me to agree with them that somebody's bad or somebody's done something wrong or that something is not right, and I say, well, maybe this is what it is. The thing I always get is, you're always trying to defend these people against me. And
I've probably
I'm
heard that a
not,
few times myself.
yeah, I'm not trying to defend people against anything. I'm
Yeah.
trying to see what is the rational, loving
Right.
reason
Right.
they would have done these things, and why I reject the reason that they did it because they wanted to hurt something or be bad.
Sure.
I just have to reject that.
And everyone's ego really wants to be betrayed by its temporary allies so that it can have yet further justification for its defenses. Because, well, now, gee, if this ally turned against me, I really need to up my military might, whether it's physical armaments and munitions and ordnance, or or if it's just psychologically preparing the the scathing rebuttal of whatever situation seems to be the annoyance du jour, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just that is, classic traits of the ego.
Yeah, yeah. And then we're not blindsided when we notice, oh yeah, there goes my ego again, just like everyone else's ego. And then just being willing to gently, non-derisively laugh at that and just say, wow, how defended we are against the truth, how resistant we are to the peace that is behind all of our defenses and all of our procrastinations and diversions and deceptions that try to make the dream real and a big deal, and completely ignore the eternal reality of our true identity that's outside of space and time, that if fully recognized would vaporize our dreams in a less than a nanosecond.
Yeah. And nano, we don't want that.
Yes. We don't want the orcs either.
Exactly.
With or without Mork.
Without more.
Do you want to read on from there?
Okay, I'll read. We have about 7 minutes left, and
Yeah,
I don't know anything after this,
sure.
but yeah, folks will be coming in for our next group, which is just so cool. I just love this. All right, so so this is Helen in this. Apparently, she's writing down her thoughts about this situation with Bill and this person S and this house in New Jersey or whatever. So she says, when I mentioned to Bill S, whom I did not expect to discuss at all, the thought crossed my mind, my God, you mean I have to love him too? Or love him too? This annoyed me to an incredible extent, and I dismissed it as silly. I still think it's silly, and I wouldn't want to love S under any circumstances. In fact, I feel extremely negative toward him, and I insist that he's a bad influence on Bill. And then in parentheses, in some sense, I do believe this, in the parentheses. And I think he's a real menace to me. I remembered at the time that S has several times mentioned, he was drunk, I think, that I make him nervous. He gave different reasons for this each time, and Bill told me it's not unusual. I, quote, make a lot of people nervous, unquote. This is ridiculous and is primarily a negative sentiment of Bill's toward me. Bill's attitude has not helped me to regard S more charitably. It has blinded Bill to his actual antagonism toward me, and has also given S a false sense of security because of Bill's unconscious backing. There's really a very good reason why I make S, quote, very nervous, unquote. It's not to his credit either. Wow, I'm sorry, I have to just stop right here. This is like classic ego discussion of this is what I think you think, and I think you and I think you're thinking about me, and I'm thinking about you, and wow, what a crazy. I mean, honestly, I have thought these very same things. I personally have thought these very same things about people in situations. So this is I mean, Helen, talk about honest. Uh-huh. So uh so
Well, once again, Helen's story is all of our stories, right?
yeah, exactly.
And so her ambivalence between Holy Spirit and ego is the same for all of us. I mean, we're all in the same boat of the two thought systems and the decision maker that chooses between them. Well, we're all equally 100% insane when we are in ego mode, and full blown, no holds barred craziness. And when we drop that, we're all 100% peaceful, innocent, immune to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune of the dream world, and happily so. And we vacillate between those two all the time. And when Helen was in her right mind and very clear and channeling Jesus, if you will, the course came through. And but as Ken points out in this wonderful biography, which is really about all of us, when she wasn't, she was just as crazy as anybody else and just as wrong in her assessment of everything, and often left field about everything, as we all are. So
Exactly, exactly. It makes me think of there's a song a long time ago in the 60s, I think, and I'll find it because I don't even know what it's called, but there's a line in it that said that I knew that you knew that I knew that you knew.
Right.
It's like that. It's like, oh my gosh, our thinking just making this all of this so crazy. So Ken continues. This last comment is probably an allusion, not illusion, allusion to a past life hateful mistreatment of women by S, in part sexual, and his fear of counterattack brought on by his guilt. Helen, no doubt, believed that S's homosexuality was chosen by him as a defense against women for his sins against them, sins for which Helen's ego clearly wished to hold him accountable. Helen returns to this later in the letter. And so, yeah, so now he's talking, kind of saying that she's attributing these thoughts to this guy in a past life, that something that happened in a past life has made him do this in this life, which is, I mean, that's a concept that is kind of talked about a lot throughout the world and with absolutely no proof whatsoever. But
And I was going to say, ironically, from what I've read from Ken's biography as well as other places of his commentary, it would seem that Helen's public persona would be dead set against any kind of admission that reincarnation or past life existence had any validity whatsoever. And here she was basically, attributing her irritation, annoyance, and mistrust of this guy or whatever, that by a past life situation. I don't know. I just find that funny, but it's like, again, how inconsistent we all are and how forgiving we need to be of ourselves and everyone because we're so inconsistent. Yeah.
And so conflicted in our beliefs, which is why, and I know our time is just about up, but it just was reminding me of in the what do you call it, traits of
Characteristics,
God's teacher. Yeah, the characteristics of teachers, and the one of honesty, and honesty being consistently.
Yep.
That what you think is what you say, and what you say is what you think, and there's no inconsistency in your thought or behavior. And so, that, and I think that's, I mean, guilty here of all of that. I'm because I'll say things like this, and I'll also say that things like, the computer's not working right because Mars is in retrograde. I think you said that earlier, or that
well, Mercury, but close enough.
Mercury, yes, and even Mars, because
it could be any planet as long as there's a scapegoat handy, right?
Yeah, it's a planet, and something outside of me that somehow has an effect on me, and it's these are again just our childish attempt to explain something that we're trying to put things together in a way to make it seem logical, and really there is no logic. It's impossible. Anyway, oh my goodness.
As always, thanks again for another wonderful hour sharing and reading together, Lynn, and I look forward to the next one.
All right. Thank you so much, Bruce. I love you, brother, and have fun down there in the desert. I'll have fun here in this desert.
Okay. It's all one big desert, isn't it?
It's all one big desert, man. I think we're supposed to leave.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere. Yeah.
All right, love. I'll talk